Hi, it's Dwyer, DwyerVIP.com, GamblersAdvisory.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Floyd Mayweather has taken the plunge, as have other fighters, in moving from HBO to Showtime. Let's recall that Lucien Boutte took the plunge earlier. Manny Pacquiao took the plunge earlier. Right? I applaud Mayweather and Al Heyman. Understand that Showtime is a member of the CBS family. There is a great opportunity there for promotion of fights and for doing so on network television. Let's also remember, too, that a lot of these networks have split allegiances, right? A lot of them broadcast other sports and have other priorities. Showtime is making a very big push in boxing, and it shows with this 6-fight deal. The purpose of this video is twofold. The first is to discuss Floyd Mayweather's position in history, given that, quite frankly, he's now moving into his late 30s, right? So first we talk about his place in history, and then I talk about the 6 fights I'd like to see Floyd Mayweather have, okay, against current competition. Let's get after it. In my opinion, and understand this is all my opinion, your opinion is as valid as any, and I hope you leave your opinion here in the comment section on the video. In my opinion, Floyd Mayweather, simply put, is the dominant fighter of our time. The contenders to the throne have fallen off. Now, we're not just talking about his weight class. I'm talking about in the entire sport. Let's talk about the contenders to the throne. Manny Pacquiao. You know, before the absolutely devastating Marquez KO loss, and understand that's not a TKO, that's a KO. He's unconscious, face first on the canvas, right? That video is going to live in infamy. Understand too that many fighters, especially elite fighters, have gone their entire careers without having moments like that, right? Bernard Hopkins has been knocked down. He's never been knocked out. Understand, Muhammad Ali, if you came up in the 1970s like I did, you kept seeing video of Joe Frazier clipping Ali and Ali actually going down in the fight. Ali went down in other fights as well, but he always got up. All of those knockdowns looked like flash knockdowns or momentary knockdowns, right? It's very rare when an elite fighter literally is unconscious on the canvas. Manny Pacquiao was unconscious on the canvas in his last Marquez fight. The point I'm making here, though, is that before that fight, and we're talking about Manny during his run, I'm not going back to the Torrealba KO loss or any other loss early in Pacquiao's career. During Pacquiao's reign of dominance, understand, before the Marquez KO loss, which is devastating, Pacquiao lost to Timothy Bradley. Now, we can argue over that fight. Did Bradley actually win the fight? Just understand there are some, Brian Kenny is one of them, who believes that Bradley did. I believe Bradley won the fight. The point, though, is that that fight was very competitive. Competitive in a way, quite frankly, that we haven't seen in a Mayweather fight going back to Castillo. Understand, as interesting as the Cotto fight was, Floyd Mayweather won that fight by several rounds, right? Shane Mosley, buzzed Mayweather. Mayweather won that fight by several rounds. Just listen to the commentary on the fight. By the start of the 9th round, everyone at the fight, the commentators, knew that Mosley needed a KO to win the fight. So in my opinion, Manny Pacquiao has fallen off. Now when I say our time, how far back am I going? Yes, I'm going back all the way to the 1980s. Roy Jones was dominant in the 1990s, right? I'll be the first to say Roy Jones went through a stretch where I had never seen a fighter as dominant, right? Jones was beating very good fighters like Virgil Hill by very wide margins. But understand, unfortunately, Roy Jones has gone through a stretch that has made many forget the 1990s. He's been getting not just beaten, but KO'd way too often, right? Remember what I said about the visual with Manny Pacquiao, right? This is a different level of decline than, let's say, what happened to Ray Robinson a couple of generations ago, right? This is a guy who is getting knocked out in devastating and too frequent fashion. So many times that we almost forget the devastating knockouts. There was the knockout at the hands of Antonio Tarver. It was devastating. Keep in mind, after that fight, which was the rematch, they fought a third fight that Tarver dominated. Then there was the knockout at the hands of Glenn Johnson. Devastating knockout. Roy Jones is on the canvas for longer than 10 seconds, right? At one point, a corner person puts ice under Jones's head. It's that bad. Roy's badly hurt. There's a knockout at the hands of Danny Green. Let's remember, after Jones gets knocked down and gets back up, he's so out of it, he can't even throw a punch. He's dominated in that fight. There's also the knockout at the hands of Denis Lebedev. I'll say this. I heard of the knockout. The fight was in Russia. I heard of the knockout before I saw the fight. Then when I saw the fight, even knowing that Roy Jones actually woke up from the knockout, I feared for Roy's health, right? These knockouts seem to validate the suspicion that Jones, who was very dominant in the 1990s, was more of an athlete than a technician, right? He's getting hit so flush that he's getting knocked unconscious in multiple fights. This is Manny Pacquiao against Marquez in their last fight, multiplied, right? In my opinion, Roy Jones has fallen off when compared to Floyd Mayweather. Let's talk about Bernard Hopkins. Absolutely dominant as a middleweight champion. People forget that level of dominance, right? He was dominant. He is one of history's very best middleweights. But he lost to Jermaine Taylor twice. Granted, an argument can be made. Both were very close. Maybe he didn't lose. But officially, he lost to Jermaine Taylor twice. Now, we'll forgive you if you lose to a great fighter. Here, Taylor faded too quickly after that fight, losing to Kelly Pavlik multiple times, losing to Carl Froch, losing to Arthur Abraham. Frankly, I thought he lost to Corey Spinks. He may have lost to Winky Wright, right? I believe that hurts Bernard Hopkins's legacy. When people think Hopkins, they're going to think about multiple losses to Jermaine Taylor. Understand, we're talking about the dominant fighter of our era. The standard is so high, it doesn't really allow for bad moments like that. Let's talk about one of my favorite fighters ever, and that's Vitaly Klitschko. I think he's underrated. I think he's one of history's best heavyweights. He stepped up but lost to Lennox Lewis. Okay, Lennox Lewis is one of history's best heavyweights. But then there's the Chris Byrd fight. Now understand, there are two schools of boxing fans. The first, and I'm in the first, says that this is a sport. You better believe if I'm out there and I tear out my shoulder in a fight, even a fight I'm dominating, if I tear out my shoulder, I'm thinking, wow, I'm doing this for the money. This is an athletic competition. I've blown out my arm. I'd like to use this arm years down the road. Let me stop this fight. Let me bow out of this fight. Let me have someone look at my arm. If I can save this arm, that's my top priority. Right now, that's one school. The other school says that this is war. In the other school, the fans have never forgiven Roberto Duran for the Ray Leonard rematch. You don't quit in fights. You certainly don't quit in fights where you have a lead, right? We saw the other school on display when Eddie Chambers literally lost the use of an arm against Tomas Ademic and actually stayed in the fight, stuck a jab out, and came close to winning that fight. We saw the other school when Jean Pascal literally, between rounds, got his shoulder popped back into place so he could continue on in a fight that he won. Now to those fans, they can't forgive Vitaly Klitschko for backing out of the Chris Byrd fight, right? Keep in mind, people are going to look at your best moments and your worst moments when they say, where does he rank in his era? They're never going to forgive him for backing out of the Chris Byrd fight. And it doesn't help that Chris Byrd believes that Vitaly Klitschko knew that that fight was much closer than the scorecard suggested. Byrd believes he was going to have a feast as that fight continued. Right? That fight is a bit of a problem for the Vitaly Klitschko legacy. Suffice it to say, in my eyes, Vitaly Klitschko deserves serious consideration for being the best of his era. Right? And let me also point out, too, that these rankings can change based on what these guys do going forward. Now, Vladimir Klitschko, to me, doesn't belong in the conversation. Too many knockdowns and losses. Ross Purity KO'd him. Corey Sanders KO'd him. Layman Brewster KO'd him. He was knocked down in other fights. The Sam Peter fight, where he was knocked down multiple times. Probably his biggest crime is that he doesn't have a signature win in a great fight against a dominant opponent in his prime. The David Haye fight was a disaster. Not enough big moments. There's no moment like the Ali Frazier moment where Frazier clips Ali and Ali goes down. Right? That fight is known for a bad toe more than it is boxing brilliance. Unfortunately, when we think back on fights, Vladimir Klitschko has no moment like Vitaly Klitschko had against Lennox Lewis. Right? We know Vitaly's world class because that Lennox Lewis fight against a world class opponent, granted maybe not in his prime, but a world class opponent, was a great fight while it lasted. Right? And so, in my opinion, Vladimir Klitschko doesn't belong here. Let me point out too, Marquez has a problem. The problem is the Floyd Mayweather fight. As we think about the dominant fighter of an era, guess what? If you lost by a wide margin to Floyd Mayweather, you're not going to get the votes that Floyd's getting. He has another problem. The first round of the first Manny Pacquiao fight. Wow, was he getting rocked? As I've said, the only reason that series continued on was because Joe Cortez looks at him as his shoulders are on the canvas after the third knockdown and actually continues to count We know many referees, seeing Manny Pacquiao knock a guy down 3 times with the guy's shoulders on the canvas, would have just waved off that fight, right? Let me also point out that there's another fight against a fighter who's still unbeaten, the Chris John fight, right? That's another fight that doesn't help Marquez's case. Let's talk about Oscar De La Hoya and Shane Mosley here again. Unfortunately, both guys lost to Floyd Mayweather. Keep in mind, the Oscar loss to Mayweather was particularly troublesome. Oscar was a younger man than he was when he fought Manny Pacquiao, because, of course, Oscar had the weight advantage. Floyd Mayweather was actually fighting Oscar in Oscar's weight class, no catch weight. The fact that Floyd beat Oscar and the fact that Floyd beat Shane Mosley kind of takes these guys out of the mix. I'll agree with those of you who want to argue that Mosley was one of the best lightweight champions in history. No question about it. Mosley at 135, wow, was he good? But as you're watching this video, was that the first thing that came to mind? The other problem too is Mosley has the PED admission kind of lingering in the background. I think that further hurts him. Also, I myself question whether Shane Mosley really beat Oscar De La Hoya in the rematch. Now let's stretch this out a little bit more historically. Let's talk about Muhammad Ali. I think the conversation needs to be had, but I also think, as we talk about Ali, in my opinion, the best Ali is Ali in the 1960s. I don't have a question about that, because by the time Ali is fighting Joe Frazier in the early 70s, he has no legs. Understand, this is a heavyweight who may have had the best legs in heavyweight history, right? He loses the legs after the Vietnam out the ring period, right? Now understand, Ali in the 1960s, this is prime Ali, gets dropped by Sonny Banks. Take a look at that video. He gets dropped by Henry Cooper. His corner, the great Angelo Dundee, now admits that there was some extra time in that Cooper snafu. The corner did buy their fighter extra time, and Ali needed the extra time, right? In my opinion, that's a problem in looking at the Ali legacy when we're talking about the dominant fighter of our time. Also, style-wise, Ali didn't go to the body much. I encourage you to look at the films, right? Great hand speed and stuff, and I'm talking about prime Ali. Didn't go to the body much, didn't lead much. Let's talk about Joe Louis. As I said, we're stretching this historically a little bit. Joe Louis had very slow foot speed. He looks like he's in cement, right? Joe Louis got dropped in his prime by Max Schmeling. We remember the second fight. Understand, Louis got owned in the first fight, right? There isn't a lot of room for imperfection when we're talking about the dominant fighter of our era. Julio Cesar Chavez has to be considered, but he had a problem with hand speed. In fact, he had a problem with speed in general. Now understand, he's losing to Meldrick Taylor. He drops Taylor with 2 seconds left in the fight. If referee Richard Steele simply lets that fight continue, in my opinion, as he should have, Taylor wins the fight, because Chavez wouldn't have had enough time to come across the ring, right? Larry Merchant says it on the telecast, and he's right. If the referee's goal is to protect the safety of the fighter, letting that fight continue would have protected Taylor's safety, right? So that's a cloudy issue for me. Clearly, though, and I was in Mexico, Clearly, Chavez lost to Pernell Whitaker. If you had doubts about the Taylor fight, the Whitaker fight confirms that Chavez wasn't on Whitaker's level that night. Let's talk about Pernell Whitaker. I cannot say here on film that I have ever in my life seen a better defensive fighter than Pernell Whitaker. The gold standard. He's so good defensively that I still watch that Oscar De La Hoya Pernell Whitaker fight, a fight they claim he lost, just so I could figure out great defensive moves. And that's not even prime Whitaker, right? Whitaker, dominant defensively. The problem is he doesn't have Floyd's left hook or offense, right? He was a dominant defensive fighter. I know YouTube Nation disagrees with me on this. He was a dominant defensive fighter. But he has no fight like Floyd Mayweather's fight against Diego Corrales or Floyd Mayweather's fight against Arturo Gatti. Folks, those are offensive masterpieces. Forget Floyd's defense. Both of those fights are offensive masterpieces. This is a guy in his prime, on his game, landing hard punches, dropping his opponent multiple times. Pernell doesn't have enough of those moments, right? Let me also point out too that some might belong on the list skill-wise, but they just didn't fight enough guys in their prime. And I put Joe Calzaghe in this category. So, in my opinion, in history, there are very few who can stand with Floyd Mayweather for technical brilliance. And even then, you really have to focus on the finest stages of their careers. So let me talk about a short list here. Who would have a chance of beating prime Floyd Mayweather in his weight class? And we'll include the weight classes Floyd was in his prime, right? Up to welter. Well, first there is the Ray Robinson before his first retirement. I'll just say this, style-wise, Ray Robinson surely hit harder than Floyd. All you have to do is look at the Rocky Graziano stoppage. Just that fight alone will convince you that Ray Robinson hit as hard as anyone at welter. Power-wise, there is no comparison. But Robinson never fought, and I mean never, fought a fighter with Floyd's slickness on the ropes. And Robinson's defense wasn't as good as Floyd's. You know that from just the wars Robinson had. Fights against guys like Jake LaMotta, right? Fights where Robinson's hair's all over the place and he's getting rocked, right? I don't know who wins that Floyd-Ray Robinson fight. I think they both have their moments. Then there is, more recently, Ray Leonard before retinal surgery. Now, he wasn't as good inside as Floyd, as we saw when he lost to Roberto Duran in their first fight when Duran roughed him up. But Ray Leonard, in my opinion, and I know this is controversial, had faster hands than Floyd, and he used them to throw combinations. He also had better upper body elusiveness. Floyd blocked shots. Ray Leonard was so fast, Ray didn't have to block shots, right? Look at Ray Leonard's upper body. Also, Ray used the entire ring. You don't really have a lot of Ray fights where Ray's just lounging off at the side of the ring in the early 80s. I know Marvin Hagler had Ray up on the side of the ring. That's late 80s. That's Ray after a multi-year layoff, right? Prime Ray wasn't really lounging out, getting hit on the ropes. He was moving, right? He had great legs, right? He was also more charismatic and more of a showman than Floyd. Ray would play to the crowd. That works with judges. Ray's fans, quite frankly, were more invested in Ray than Floyd fans are invested in Floyd. I know it's controversial, but you know the showman, right? I believe that Ray Leonard is is a fighter in which a good faith argument can be made that he would have a chance of beating Floyd Mayweather in his own weight class. But let me say this. What I'm going to say next is controversial, but it's based on styles. Styles make fights. I've looked at a few more tapes. The guy of the last 30 years, who, in my opinion, would have the best chance to beat prime Floyd Mayweather in his own weight class, in my opinion, is prime welterweight Thomas Hearns. Due to Hearns' height, length, great jab. All you have to do is look at the Hitman's fight against Roberto Duran. Understand, Duran is a master inside. He's a boxer's boxer inside. And understand, Duran had no chance whatsoever of getting by Hearns' jab. And Hearns' right hand at that time was just a showstopper. I'm not sure if Floyd would be able to duplicate what Ray Leonard did against Thomas Hearns. And let's remember, Ray Leonard lost several rounds in that fight. That Hearns-Leonard fight is a great fight that was still hanging in the balance at the end of the fight when Hearns gets stopped, right? My point is simply, I believe Thomas Hearns, style-wise, would give Floyd Mayweather all kinds of problems. Okay, now, outside of Floyd's weight class, in history, the list of technical masters over long stretches that rival Floyd's dominance, let me throw out a few more names. There is Carlos Monzon. From the Nino Benvenuti fight to the end of his career, he's as dominant as anyone, right? He has one of history's absolute best jabs, right? His mind state was the type where whatever was happening in the ring, no matter how chaotic, Monzon never seemed to panic. He never seemed to be in a hurry, but yet he absolutely destroyed opponents. Think of a Larry Holmes level jab with Mike Tyson type of explosive punching power, right? Let me also point out too that Monzon, one of the biggest talents in the sport's history, because he seemed to be bored in the ring. He apparently didn't train that hard outside of the ring. He was a man about town. He was a late night party person, right? In the ring, he stands tall. He's not even crouched down. Doesn't seem to be using a lot of energy. But make no mistake, he was an absolutely dominant fighter for a very long period of time. He's one of history's best middleweight champions. In terms of matching Floyd's level of dominance, Monzon's in the conversation. Then there is one of my favorite fighters, Salvador Sanchez. I know he died young. He died at something like 23 years old. But understand, this guy was so good inside, it's scary. He's Floyd before Floyd, right? Take a look at the Wilfredo Gomez fight. That's a masterpiece. His destruction of Danny Little Red Lopez, that's a masterpiece. When they asked Hall of Famer, perhaps the best fighter out of Africa ever, Azuma Nelson, who was the best fighter he ever fought, Azuma Nelson, in interview after interview, says Salvador Sanchez, right? Understand, Roy Jones's favorite fighter before he got in the sport was Salvador Sanchez, right? There is no one in the history of the sport that I would take against Salvador Sanchez at middleweight. Right? The biggest negative that can be said about Sanchez is just that he died too young. I thought he was on the verge of taking over the sport. Also, there's Ezzard Charles as a light heavyweight. Let's remember, I know Ezzard Charles beat Joe Louis as a heavyweight. I know he was heavyweight champion. I know he gave Rocky Marciano perhaps Marciano's toughest fight. Right? We're talking about a guy who was an excellent heavyweight. Apparently he had no peers at light heavyweight. What happened was Ezzard Charles was so good he actually killed a man once in the ring in a fight. And apparently after that, like Chris Eubank, after the Watson fight, he just had problems finishing. Still dominant, but not the same fighter. Right? Ezzard Charles needs to be on the list. Also the great Ricardo Lopez. People in Mexico know what I'm talking about. This guy was dominant. The only downside to Ricardo Lopez is he fought at such a light weight. He was dominant, just like Floyd Mayweather was, for a long period of time. Now let's just say that the air at this altitude is rare. I know I'm setting a record here for long videos, but let me just say this. Floyd's 6 fights under a CBS deal. What could he do to make these fights as great as ever? Who could he fight? I'll be brief. He's off to a great start. Robert Guerrero, a southpaw, is one of the toughest opponents that Floyd could possibly face. Right? I believe the public doesn't fully appreciate, and I believe the odds being bandied around are absurd. They don't appreciate how competitive this fight is. In my opinion, Robert Guerrero is a much more dangerous opponent than Miguel Cotto. I'll just put it this way. I've been online here. I've been picking Mayweather in numerous fights. I picked Mayweather over Cotto, as people know. Here, I'm hesitant. Guerrero's that good. This is a real fight. This is a fight of the year candidate. Guerrero has a jab. Floyd has problems with southpaw. Right? If Guerrero moves around the ring and can pop his jab, I know people are talking about hand speed and all this other stuff. Understand, a great jab neutralizes a lot of hand speed. And Floyd has been lounging over at the side of the ring for too many fights. He might not be ready to actually try to chase a guy to find him. Understand, too, that Guerrero has had some fights where he's completely outworked guys stalking him like Michael Casitas. Guerrero is one of the best possible opponents for Floyd. Let me name some others. Right? If Floyd gets by Guerrero, and Floyd's heavily favored, I'll concede that. The fight I'd like to see is the fight against the fighter I believe is the second best fighter in boxing pound for pound. He's the middleweight champion, Sergio Martinez. Now understand, Floyd's been a champ at 154. That's where he fought Miguel Cotto. Right? 154. Sergio is the champ at 160. Now let's put this in historical context. Ray Robinson, right before he retired for the first time, fought the champ 15 pounds up, Joey Maxim, at light heavy to try to take his title, and almost did. 15 pounds. Here, if Mayweather wants to throw caution to the wind, challenge all of us and have a similar moment, he has an opportunity to do so by fighting Martinez at 160. If you're going to fight for a man's title, do us a favor and fight for that title at the man's weight. Okay? Martinez is willing to lose weight to fight Floyd at a catch weight. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But my point is this. You want the absolute best opponent Floyd could fight? Have him fight Sergio Martinez at 157. Right? All I'm saying is, if you're looking at history, if Floyd is after the ghost of Ray Robinson, then he should fight Martinez at 160, right? Because all I'm saying is, comparatively speaking, Floyd would have to fight a guy at 169 to jump to 15 pounds, which Ray Robinson did, right? If Floyd is truly chasing greatness, fight Martinez at 160. If 160 is too big for a guy who's 5'8", even though Martinez is only 5'9", fight him at 157. The next fight, Tim Bradley. Let's put this in historical context because it is a great fight. Understand that Bradley is unbeaten just like Floyd. So it's a battle of unbeatens. Understand too that Bradley has beaten Pacquiao. So this fight would have huge stakes. A Bradley win, and he might overshadow both Floyd and Manny. We might be thinking of this like many people think of Michael Watson in reference to Eubank and Ben, right? People remember that first Eubank-Watson fight, a little questionable on the decision, right? An argument can be made that Watson belongs in the conversation. If Tim Bradley, an unbeaten champion, beats Floyd Mayweather after having beaten Manny Pacquiao, this entire dialogue might be different. The next fighter Floyd should fight, right? So I've given you Guerrero, Martinez, Bradley. The next fighter Floyd should fight is the winner of the Saul Alvarez-Austin Trout matchup. Understand that Trout, like Floyd, has beaten Miguel Cotto, and he's a slick southpaw with a great jab. For a guy in his mid-30s whose leg speed isn't what it used to be, isn't Floyd going to have a hard time finding Austin Trout in the ring, getting by Austin Trout's jab, dealing with Austin Trout's foot speed? How good is Austin Trout? We just saw Delvin Rodriguez, who Trout beat before beating Cotto, look awfully good on TV, right? Rodriguez's problem wasn't a lack of talent. It was Austin Trout. Trout has a title at 154. And of course, if Canelo beats Trout, keep in mind Canelo has beaten Shane Mosley already. Canelo's unbeaten. That would be a battle of unbeatens. And one thing we know, I believe I know this without hesitation, is that Canelo hits harder than Floyd Mayweather. The margin of error is about this much. We saw Floyd get hit hard by Shane Mosley, right? What happens if Floyd gets hit hard by Canelo? Let me point out too that Canelo walks around at 168 between fights. All I'm saying is, if you're going to fight Canelo, there's no excuse. If you're even going to talk about fighting Canelo, there's no excuse not to fight Sergio Martinez at 160. Just food for thought. The next person Floyd should fight, right, in no particular order, although I would love to see him fight Martinez after Guerrero. The next person Floyd should fight is the winner of the Kell Brook versus Devin Alexander fight. Here again, Kell Brook's unbeaten. He has better legs than Floyd Mayweather. Could Mayweather hunt down Kell Brook like Carson Jones almost did? Go back and look at my video before that Carson Jones-Kell Brook fight. I was concerned for Kell Brook because, in my opinion, to beat Kell Brook, someone has to be prepared to hunt him down. When's the last fight where Floyd Mayweather hunted a guy down? Haven't the guys been coming to Floyd? Didn't you see, Victor Ortiz literally coming to Floyd, then headbutting Floyd, hugging up on Floyd, kissing Floyd, right? Guys are, Miguel Cotto had Floyd up on the ropes. That's what Floyd's accustomed to, right? What happens when he's fighting a guy who is a hoverer, like Kell Brook, who has hand speed, who has power, who's an offensive juggernaut? Does Floyd have what it takes to corner Kell Brook? That's a big question mark. Let's talk about Devin Alexander. Here again, southpaw, right? You know, I thought Zab Judah was looking awfully good against Floyd the first 3 rounds of their fight. Go back and take a look at it. Judah even scores a knockdown. Floyd's glove hits the canvas. Right? My point to you is this. Devin Alexander has very fast hands. So fast that he made Marcus Maidana look like an amateur. He made Randall Bailey look like an amateur. Let me also say this too. Devin Alexander's uppercut is no joke. Look at the Juan Urango fight. If Devin Alexander beats Kell Brook, and I think he will, but we'll find out, then wow, he needs to be in the Floyd sweepstakes. Let's go one step further. The last fighter, the 6th fighter, who I think should face Floyd Mayweather if Floyd's going to really pamper the public here, is Lucas Matthysse. All I can say is this. Who cuts off the ring at this point better than Lucas Matthysse? He handles speed guys. Take a look at the last half of his fight against Zab Judah. We all know, watching this video, that Judah has power and has hand speed. Has Judah ever been tracked down methodically like this, other than in the Miguel Cotto fight? I mean, Judah's on his back foot getting hunted down. Right? Take a look at the Devin Alexander Lucas Matthysse fight. Alexander's getting hunted down by a guy with no fear of what's coming back, by a guy with knockout power in both hands. If you're looking for a slugger to go up against Floyd Mayweather, to have no fear of Mayweather, and to literally be in there thinking about knocking out Mayweather, neutralizing his speed, Lucas Matthysse belongs on the list. Right? So to sum up, who are the 6 I'd like to see Floyd fight? Robert Guerrero, who he's fighting. Sergio Martinez. Let's decide who's the best pound for pound where it should be decided, in the ring. Right? Also, one is a champ at 154, one's a champ at 160. Does it get any better? Then, of course, we have Timothy Bradley, unbeaten. The winner of Canelo, Austin Trout, who'll be unbeaten. Right? The winner of Kell Brook versus Devin Alexander, an unbeaten fighter against a slick southpaw with hand speed and a one-punch uppercut. One-punch KO power. And, of course, Lucas Matthysse. We're talking about one-punch power. All you have to do is look at the Mike Dallas fight, folks. Okay? Let's see what Floyd does. I congratulate Floyd and his team, Al Heyman, Leonard Ellaby, for a great deal with CBS. Let's hope that with that deal, Floyd takes this, if possible, to the next level with some great fights. As I've said in this video, in my opinion, Floyd Mayweather is a dominant fighter of the last 30 years. I do believe there's some guys who give him a hard matchup. Certainly, he's there with the absolute very best. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Let me also say that I'll agree. In his prime, he did avoid Antonio Margarito, just like Ray Robinson, who's also one of history's very best, dodged Charlie Burley. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com, and I'll also concede I didn't name some of the biggest names in boxing history, guys like Rocky Marciano. You know what? All I can say is you've got to make the cut someplace. Thanks for watching.